And almost all businesses, from restaurants to Greyhound to government, are closed down. In downtown Dallas, it is like a ghost town, very eerie. No one is out but a few locals who live in the area and the homeless population, and all of this on the heels of last night's ambush on police. Gunmen shot and killed 5 police officers and wounded 7 others during a protest over fatal police shootings of black men in other states. It appeared to be the deadliest day for U.S. law enforcement since the 2001 terrorist attacks and Thursday's bloodshed, which unfolded just a few blocks from where President John F. Kennedy was slain in 1963, also evoked the trauma of the nation's tumultuous civil rights era. Joining me to talk about this is Dr. Alex Del Carmen. He is the executive director and professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. And Doctor, good afternoon to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with us, and wanted to get into the conversation about, some of the events that unfolded and where the country is going from here. Just to set this up, demonstrations were held in several other U.S. cities last night to protest the police killings of 2 more black men. A Minnesota officer on Wednesday fatally shot Philando Castile while he was in a car with a woman and a child. The shooting's aftermath live streamed in a widely shared Facebook video. A day earlier, Alton Sterling shot in Louisiana after being pinned to the pavement by 2 white officers. That, too, was captured on a cell phone video. Dallas Police Chief David Brown blamed, quote, snipers, and said 3 suspects are in custody. Mayor Mike Rawlings said that a 4th was slain by Dallas police in a downtown parking garage where he had exchanged gunfire with officers. And Chief Brown told reporters this morning that the snipers fired ambush style on the officers. 2 civilians were also injured. And let me get your thoughts. A horrific story that unfolded here. What were some of your initial reactions when this first happened?
Well, there's no question that what happened last night in Dallas is of historical significance. Obviously we don't see, and we haven't seen this level of massacre on police officers since 9/11. And so it also is a reflection of where we are as a country, how divided we are, the different opinions that we have about what's happened in the past few days. And unfortunately, there are people in our society that react to these things in an emotional way, which is completely illogical. And then in addition to that, they resort to violence to achieve justice in their mind, which really what it does is just makes things worse for the rest of us.
There was a massive show of force. U.S. Marshal Service, ATF, FBI, Texas Rangers, Dallas County Sheriff's Department. They rolled out heavy artillery last night. How does law enforcement determine which agency takes the investigative lead in a story like this?
Well, typically when it comes to these kind of situations, Dallas Police Department will take the lead because it actually happened, within Dallas territory. But the situation is typically fluid. And these types of events, what we see is initially we may get initial reports of 1 shooter, then it evolves to 2 shooters, then it evolves to 3, and then it goes back down to 1 or 2. And so as the story evolves, the federal agencies, what they do is they come in to help support the local law enforcement officials in obviously responding to it, being able to circle the area, protect human life, attend to those that are in need of medical care, and then at some point after the threat has been neutralized, what the agencies do is they have a discussion as to which jurisdiction is going to oversee the case, and that is largely determined by whether or not this touches on federal law, or whether or not the local law enforcement authority has the capability of investigating the incident and responding to it accordingly. In this case, Dallas Police Department is more than capable to respond to the incident and also to investigate it. But I would guess that the federal agencies, such as the FBI, would help with regards to crime analysis, be able to provide logistical support as Dallas Police Department continues to investigate the motive and whether or not other people help them.
And when you also look at it from the standpoint of touching on federal law, indeed, if there are federal laws that have been broken, would the cases like this, for those who have been arrested, maybe later charged, would those wind up in federal court, or are these cases maybe going to be prosecuted on the state level?
So it depends, right? So when we look at the Oklahoma City bombing, in that particular case, there were both federal laws that were broken in that this was a federal building, but it also touched upon state and local laws. And so what they decided to do was to prosecute McVeigh in federal court because they thought that he would achieve a faster, more efficient manner in which to prosecute him. If the state would have jumped in and said, we're going to prosecute him also, it would have been perfectly within the legal boundaries of doing both. And so in this particular case, my guess is you have the loss of life of police officers, and being a Texan as I am, I know that in Texas we demand and require justice. So I would not be surprised at all that this is going to strictly be handled through the DA's office out of Dallas.
Will this open up a dialogue, in your estimation, as to how law enforcement patrols areas? In other words, will this maybe prompt a switch to a two-man element instead of a one-man element? And expanding on that, Chicago and Houston also announcing earlier today, about 2 hours ago, that both of those cities are now going to require 2 officers in patrol cars at all times. Is that going to be something we're going to see go out nationwide?
So perhaps, and sometimes we see these knee-jerk reactions to these types of events because they are so emotional to those of us that work with law enforcement that we tend to sort of say, well, this is what we're going to do from this point forward, and then perhaps retract or modify our initial plans. It's hard to say. What I can tell you, however, is that what this is going to do is definitely provoke some thought and reflection and discussion as to how law enforcement is going to react to protest, to any type of organized protest in any of the cities throughout the United States. Because I think what this does is it teaches us a lesson as to how law enforcement should approach these events and how we can protect the lives of those officers that are protecting the lives of the protesters.
And also, too, this would, I would imagine, maybe get into a dialogue about concentrating or having a demonstration, say, concentrated in a single area as opposed to maybe a demonstration being spread out over multiple blocks. You think that might be one aspect that's going to be looked at?
Possibly. I think it's going to be hard to regulate, especially in small towns, which have a very different, demography than, say, a city like Dallas or Fort Worth. However, I think what it brings to bear is the rules of engagement. Meaning, are we going to let people bring guns to these protests? Are we going to allow individuals to occupy buildings that are next to the protest? Are we going to be able to, should we go and simply scan the area prior to the event for any bombs or any kind of threats? And some of that law enforcement currently does, but I'm guessing that they're going to increase a lot of the things that they have done, and they're going to use this event in Dallas as a lessons learned type of thing, where we're going to begin to rethink how we protect the lives of other people in a massive concentration.
In a case like this, when all of this was starting to unfold, a little bit after 9 o'clock our time, I'm in the Dallas area as well, that local media went into overdrive to cover these events, and they stayed on the air pretty much all night long talking about this. But there was a lot of information coming out about someone that people thought might have been involved, that he was carrying a long rifle, and there was pictures of him on social media. Dallas P.D. put out a release that this was the guy. They later retracted that. It turned out that that was not the person of interest that they were looking for. What lessons can the media learn from all of this in covering stories like this, being a fluid nature as this disaster was? What would you say?
Well, what happens currently in the media, as you well know, is that there is a competition for who releases the information first. And so in that sense, when you have situations like what happened in Dallas last night, there seemed to be, and I was watching it live as well, through various news sources, and I remember thinking to myself, they're all competing for who's going to release the most tragic, the most live event, so it can increase the ratings, and people can say, I saw it in such and such channel or heard it on such and such radio station. And so I think what happens is, when you're competing for information, misinformation is often used and relied upon without any kind of scrutiny. And so what ends up happening is that sometimes innocent people get blamed for things that in fact they shouldn't have been. And we've seen that in the Olympic Park bombings in Atlanta some years back. We've seen that in previous cases, the Susan Smith case in the Carolinas, where she even sketched out the African American that everyone was looking for that drowned her 2 kids when in fact she had done it. We've seen that throughout our history, that there is a competition for the release of information, and there is very little emphasis placed on behalf of the media sources as to whether or not the information is accurate or not.
All right, drivers, I want to invite you on board. If you want to weigh in, you're more than welcome to do that. Again, it's 888-876-2336. A great pleasure to have on board Dr. Alex Del Carmen. He is the Executive Director and Professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. And we're talking about the incidents of last night. Obviously, you've heard about it, read about it. This has been on all of the national news media outlets. It is making international news as well. How do you feel about this? Let's go to Brian first up in Kentucky. Brian, welcome to the show, sir. I know you've got family members that are in law enforcement. Your thoughts on what's going on? Welcome to the show.
Very, very much deep so. Thank you for having this professor on. I think that the biggest issue that I'm seeing with everything going on, and by the way, my home state of Missouri, we had an officer shot today in Baldwin, Missouri.
Yes.
Okay. Right. The problem that I'm seeing with everything that's going on, and let me tell y'all something. I have family all the way from the FBI down to the county level and city level that are involved in law enforcement. They do not want to be involved in any kind of shooting at all. The worst thing they ever have to do that, because you have to live with the consequences afterwards. And I make an impassioned plea to everybody that's listening, everybody involved with this. Let's look with our heart first. Don't just go and judge because you see one thing or another. Let the facts come out first. Thanks, and appreciate. And my heart is with Dallas right now with everything that's going on.
Brian, thank you, sir. I appreciate the phone call. And let me get your thoughts on that, Doctor. I mean, is that the last scenario for law enforcement, pulling that sidearm, the worst nightmare, so to speak?
Yeah, I think Brian is accurate. You know, at the end of the day, what you find is that law enforcement understand. I mean, we do this and we say this to them when we train them on use of force. You know, when you draw your sidearm, when you draw that gun on someone and you pull that trigger, you are going to not only change that person's life, perhaps terminate it, but you're also going to change your own. And anyone that knows, any CHL holders, any individual that is acquainted with the usage of a weapon understands that there is a lot of responsibility that goes with drawing that gun. So, so to his point, I think that he's right. I mean, law enforcement understands that. Now, that doesn't mean that in all situations that law enforcement encounters, the officer is going to pull the gun out and know exactly, or that situation was justified or the officer was justified. Unfortunately, although I've said this before, 99.9% of officers are honest, decent, hardworking people. But unfortunately, there's a small percentage, just like in every other entity out there, of individuals that should have never been police officers, and they should have never been be allowed to carry a gun and a badge. And sadly, those are the folks that we see on these videos sometimes, and people formulate an opinion based on a very limited scope of information and sporadic instances that take place.
And Professor, based on that, you mentioned 99% of the law enforcement personnel are good folks, good people out there, but that 1% that does get through the cracks, so to speak, those are the ones that do wind up in video stories on television or you read about in the paper. Does this mean that maybe law enforcement is going to step back and maybe reevaluate the hiring criteria of those coming on board to make sure that the 1% doesn't get on those forces?
You know, it's sort of a very negative circle that has been created in the past few years. You know, we have seen nationwide a decline on the number of applicants to law enforcement positions because, quite frankly, people that watch this, especially young people that would be eligible to join the law enforcement ranks, are just simply turned off by a profession that comes into question and that people question their integrity from the first day they put on a uniform. And so what some police departments have done across the nation is they've lowered their standards to allow people to come into law enforcement that shouldn't be. And so as a result of that, I think that this does require for us to rethink that, as you say, not only in terms of who we hire, but also how we train them. And those two components are key.
And it's important for everybody to step back and realize it's about Black Lives Matter and now Blue Lives Matter, correct?
It's about all lives mattering. At the end of the day, blue lives, of course, you look at law enforcement and these 5 police officers that heroically lost their lives yesterday. Not only are you suffering or crying for the loss of life, but you also look at their families. I mean, these are folks that were fathers, mothers, that were, sisters, brothers to other individuals. And so this is a tragedy all around. I mean, you've got now families that will never be the same again after what they experienced last night.
All right, I've got a break here. I've got traffic and weather, and when we come back, let's continue the conversation, Doctor. Let's talk about, can law enforcement effectively prepare for events like this? Is law enforcement outgunned, in other words? Drivers, if you want to jump on board and offer some insight or input to this, you're more than welcome to do that. I've kind of changed this up a little bit. Instead of talking about trucking, I wanted to bring this global, international story to the forefront where you can weigh in on this. I'm sure you probably have heard about the story of 5 Dallas police officers being shot down last evening, during the culmination of a peaceful rally. There was a peaceful rally that had just wrapped up, and then 2 snipers opened fire. 3 people are in custody. 1 person is dead. And the Dallas Police Department, along with numerous law enforcement agencies, are continuing to investigate this. I've got Professor Alex Del Carmen on the phone. First, though, let's get an update on traffic and weather 20 minutes after right now on Sirius XM.
Now, traffic and weather on Road Dog Trucking News with Mark Willis.
All right, guys, let me tell you a little bit about the weather. If you're traveling around the Indiana area, if you're going to be approaching I-57 by later on this afternoon, there's going to be some showers and thunderstorm activity that's going to be popping up. And some of these storms are going to be capable of producing damaging winds and 1-inch hail before pushing into Indiana. By early this evening, a break in the stormy weather expected over the weekend prior to a chance of thunderstorms returning to the region early next week. And if you want to get some more weather, lots of it for you on social media, Sirius XM's Road Dog Trucking News, Traffic, and Weather Service. All right, I'm going to take a short break and come back in just a minute. I'm Mark Willis, live across North America right here on Sirius XM 146.
I am here to announce my intention to seek the Republican nomination for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination.
I proudly accept your nomination.
My name is Geraldine Ferraro.
Please welcome the next President of the United States.
Sirius XM's Convention Radio, coming soon to POTUS, Sirius XM 124.
Drivers, want to be home with your family? With 200 locations nationwide, Cardinal Logistics gets you home daily or several times a week. And with 100% dedicated...
Being out there, this program is being heard live across North America. It is Friday, 3:24 East, 2:24 in the Central Time Zone. And again, the phone number to call into the show, it's 888-876-2336. I'm taking a little bit of a different approach on this Friday, ladies and gentlemen, talking about that breaking story that occurred out of Dallas, not only making national news, but international news. 5 police officers were shot to death last night by snipers. Alex Del Carmen is a Ph.D., the executive director and professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, and we're talking about what is going to happen now. What is the next step? How is this going to be investigated? There have been a tremendous amount of outpouring of emotion on social media about this. A lot of folks have called in to talk shows, taken to the airwaves to express their viewpoints. And if you want to join us, you're certainly welcome to do that. And again, Professor, thank you for joining me on the show. Junior in Texas, next up. Welcome, sir. You're on with Professor Del Carmen. Your thoughts?
Well, my dad was a state trooper for 28 years before he had a tragic accident at our home. And, my father, he joined the Florida FHP just to pretty much be become a motorcycle cop, my dad did all his training and everything, and he was very distinguished with his weapon. He had a badge that he wore on his uniform that said he was distinguished. And all my childhood years growing up, my dad never had one story to tell me about, him pulling his weapon, because that was his least favorite thing. His favorite thing to do was not to write a ticket, but to just talk to somebody and, let them know, hey, you broke the rule, and, I don't want to give you the ticket. He can give these police officers, when they give a ticket, that's more paperwork that they got to deal with, and the least amount of paperwork they can deal with, the better off they are. That's how everybody is,
Yeah, and your dad's retired, you say? He's no longer a state trooper?
No, my father passed away in 2002.
Okay,
accident.
Well, and I tell you, it's you obviously have some great stories to tell and some great great memories. You probably had a tremendous amount of admiration for the job he did.
Oh yeah, and I have ultimate respect for all these cops out here, and that you might get pulled over and you're going to be caught up in the moment. I understand that, and you're going to be upset, but they're doing a job just like you. Your job is to drive a truck. Their job is to enforce the law, and that's how it is. And last night when all this broke down, I was listening to the Kelly File on Fox, and it broke my heart. And it's like, where do people get this thinking that they're sitting there protecting these people's lives that are pretty much going against what they believe in. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. Okay, Junior, I appreciate the phone call. And Professor, to his point, are you finding that in research that people are more willing to engage police these days with no hesitation or fear of retaliation? What are you finding? Are folks getting more bold, in other words?
So I think your caller makes an interesting point in terms of how policing was done in prior years versus how it's done now.
Right.
I think what we find is that people now have a sort of a sense of entitlement, that they feel that somehow a law enforcement presence is merely suggestive of the law instead of it being a definitive, presence that basically says this is the law and I'm the person representing it. So I think the chemistry has changed. In addition to that, we now have technology which has helped in some cases for us to identify the police officers that should have never been cops and either indict them or fire them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also allowed for people to have a sense that, we have cities across the United States where there are people that follow police officers in their vehicles to try to see if they can catch you, say something that is illegal or unethical.
And can law enforcement effectively prepare for events like what happened in Dallas last night? Is law enforcement outgunned at this moment, if you will?
Well, typically we wouldn't expect for law enforcement to be outgunned in a situation like what happened last night. I think last night is simply an anomaly. It's not the norm. When people go out and protest, police officers don't expect to be shot at. But as far as the techniques and tactics, yes. Law enforcement trains every day to deal with these types of scenarios. But at the same time, you can never train for something that is so unique, where you may have multiple snipers and, in different city buildings that are simply killing police officers by shooting them in their back.
And this is going to rewrite the playbook, in other words, with investigative procedures, resources, how daily routine calls are made, correct? This is going to be talked about maybe for years to come in law enforcement circles.
Yeah, there's no question that the events that happened in Dallas yesterday are not only historical in the context of significance for the law enforcement community, but we are going to be studying, talking, and analyzing what happened yesterday for many years to come. Just like when the FBI lost a few agents in a very, very drastic event in Miami many years ago, a bank robbery, and they actually analyzed and recommended that FBI agents use a higher caliber weaponry and have backup and all this other stuff. I think that we are going to learn from this event for many years to come.
All right, Professor, I got a break here. I'm coming up on news. When we come back, let's talk about the healing process. How does this begin? What are some of the most important things that people need to remember when it comes to being out there on the streets? Drivers, if you want to talk with Dr. Alex Del Carmen, the Executive Director and Professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. We're talking about what happened last night in Dallas, taking a little bit of a different approach, if you will, looking at the events that led up to the mass shootings and where the communities go from here. Drivers, do you think we're going into darker times? What do you think about this? I mean, are you concerned out there about the cities that you travel through being safe? You're welcome to talk about that as well, and your thoughts about where we go from here following this mass shooting incident that occurred in Dallas. First of all, let's get an update on traffic and weather, bottom of the hour right now on Sirius XM.
And now the latest from the Road Dog Trucking Radio News Team on Sirius XM.
All right, drivers, bottom of the hour. That does mean a news update. This news update is going to be brought to you by Schneider. Even though trucking lost 6,300 jobs during the month of June, the U.S. economy added a robust 287,000 jobs in June. That is well above the expectations after a dismal May report. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.9% from 4.7%. As 414,000 workers jump back into the labor market. More folks are hitting the bricks, in other words, trying to find work. Economists had forecast about 170,000 jobs would be added last month. The jobs growth should stave off any chatter that the economy was experiencing a broader slowdown. April's number better than first reported, rising to 144,000 from 123,000, but May, considered a blip on the economic radar, was worse, falling to 11,000 jobs of the initial reported 38,000, which had been the worst monthly report in more than 6 years. Drivers, the FMCSA is looking for comments on the recently released crash preventability demonstration program. Now, the FMCSA held an announcement yesterday. They reached out to the public to discuss the proposal to decide the usefulness of a program that conducts preventability determinations on certain type of crashes. Joe DiLorenzo, the director of the FMCSA Office of Enforcement and Compliance, said in a release this week that the proposal was made public so that the FMCSA could get something for everyone to comment on because the input is so useful to the agency. Now, the agency would accept an RDR when documentation established that the crash was not preventable by the motor carrier or commercial driver. The suggested time period for the crash preventability demonstration program would be 24 months. Drivers, that is the news. And again, it's 888-876-2336 all across North America, going beyond the headlines, ladies and gentlemen. Taking a look at the story out of Dallas yesterday that has captured the attention of the nation. Stay with me. I'm Mark Willis right here on Sirius XM 146.
From the Weather Channel Radio Network, I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. Here is a look at your east-west interstates as we head through the nighttime hours. Still looking at a severe threat once again across the Tennessee and Ohio valleys. I-40 across central and eastern Tennessee. I-64 across central and eastern Kentucky. Scattered severe thunderstorms a possibility here through the evening hours. Some of them could have a damaging wind gust potential and some very heavy rainfall. We could be looking at these storms moving on to I-64 across southwest Virginia as well. And we will see scattered strong thunderstorms, a few possibly severe, along the Pennsylvania Turnpike, talking about I-80 in central and eastern Pennsylvania and I-90 across central and eastern New York as well. And a severe threat through tonight across lower Michigan. Going to watch I-94 across south central lower Michigan between Battle Creek and Detroit. And maybe I-96 as well between Lansing and Detroit as we head through the overnight hours. And a few strong storms possible along the 94 corridor across parts of central Wisconsin. Custom weather for drivers twice an hour on the Road Dog Sirius XM Channel 146 and on the Sirius XM app for smartphones.
When it comes to choosing a trucking company, choose one that invests in its drivers and their quality of life. Trans Am Trucking equips its Kenworth trucks with refrigerators, APUs, power to run your devices, automatic transmissions, voice navigation, and more. And now we are pleased to announce that Trans Am will be providing DirecTV in our trucks at no additional charge to our drivers. Call Trans Am Trucking at 800-370-9609 or visit transamtruck.com.
Criminology, the Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. And Doctor, again, thank you for joining me here on the program. I want to get a website out there where maybe drivers can read up on what you do at the School of Criminology and follow up. Is there a website you'd recommend that they go to?
You sure can. It's www.tarleton.edu.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, sir, for doing this. And I'm just getting word in a few minutes ago that federal law enforcement officials believe that only one person is involved. Micah Johnson is believed to be the only Dallas shooter. He is deceased. Now, your thoughts on this? I mean, there were some calls that this might have been an act of terrorism, that there might have been multiple people involved with this. I know 3 were taken into custody, but does this help in the investigation when federal officials announce that there was only one Dallas shooter that's involved? That's not the end of the investigation, in other words.
Right. So what it means is that the law enforcement agencies have done an amazing work. I imagine they've been working all through the night, and that they have made enough of a progress at this point that they're able to simply say that all the other individuals that were arrested were probably not arrested related to the shooting aspect of it. And as a result of that, they've identified this individual as a lone gunman. That helps in the sense that it gives us a measure as to how far they've progressed since last night. And secondly, I imagine that they're now looking at this individual's past, this individual's background, affiliations, whether or not a threat has been made. Keep in mind that this protest was organized just recently. So this did not have a great deal of premeditation, I imagine, in terms of it being a week or 2 week long type of planning, but rather somebody that probably just picked up ammunition and went out there and started killing people.
And when the healing process begins, this is going to be a very difficult and long road for so many involved, for law enforcement, for the community in general. How do we start the healing process with this? What would you say to that?
Well, obviously, you have healing at different levels. I can tell you that having lost 2 of my former students in the line of duty, it will always stay with you. You will never lose. You will never not remember what it was like to be with that person, to talk to that individual. The law enforcement community, as you may know, is a very close-knit community, particularly here in the state of Texas. And so by virtue of the human loss yesterday, I can tell you that law enforcement will never get over this, particularly the men and women of the Dallas Police Department that work very, very closely with these officers that are now deceased. In addition to that, obviously, you have the family members that, you've got, potentially children and young people that lost their father, their mother in the line of duty. And so as a result of that, you have the human loss, the tragic loss of the family. And then you've got a community. Our community right now is incredibly sad. We Texans are very close-knitted. We are very close to each other, very proud of being Texans. And, right now, whether you're a Texan or not, this is a loss for the entire nation. So as far as what it takes to heal, I think time, like everything else, time will allow us to sort of mature over this and make progress, but I don't think we'll ever get over it.
I was watching some of the television coverage last night, and you could see the anxiety on some of the faces of the law enforcement personnel, but a determination that they were going to see this through and get this thing done and get it wrapped up. Did you observe the same thing, that there was a call to duty, get the job done, and then we can reflect? Is that accurate?
That is absolutely accurate, and what you are seeing also is you see that they are still engaged in the process of an investigation. Right now, they're trying to figure out, why this person did what he did, how he went about doing it, if anybody else helped him, and so they have to remain focused on what they've been trained to do and put, in many ways, their emotions aside. And I imagine that part of the reason why federal law enforcement is helping out is to also allow for the local law enforcement authorities, in this case both DART as well as Dallas Police Department, to really have a moment to simply let the emotions flow.
Yeah.
But it is customary, for instance, when a police officer dies in a particular city, that adjacent cities or cities in other parts of the state will come in and they will relieve those officers so they can attend the funeral of their colleague. And so, again, this is a very close-knitted community where people help each other out.
I was also looking at some of the social media posts on Facebook, like with the Denver Police Department, San Francisco, Chicago Police Department, all offering online support, that they stand with members of the law enforcement community. Social media is really a great tool to help spread word about things that are happening out there. I mean, is this the wave of the future, so to speak, that social media is going to lead the way when it comes to getting word out about stories and also maybe starting the healing process?
It is, and social media, of course, like everything else in life, can be used for good things and bad things. But I think in this particular case, it is heartwarming to see how many agencies and how many people have expressed their condolences to the law enforcement community in Texas, and specifically in Dallas. And so I imagine that there will be fundraisers. There will also be FundMe accounts that will start to help out those families that have lost their primary breadwinner as well.
I think from also, too, what's interesting is to see the medical personnel that were also involved and at the hospital. They were helping people on the scene out there, collaborative efforts underway. And some of the video that I was seeing outside some of the local hospitals, you could see the strain on some of the medical personnel that were trying to help those injured and try to save lives out there. They're also going to be reliving this over the years going forward, right? This is a very traumatic event for them as well.
There's no question, and many people will, what the media sometimes doesn't cover is that after an incident such as this one, you have people that end up retiring because they can no longer go back to work. You have folks that will never be able to sleep a good night's sleep from this point until the end of their lives. You have folks that suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, you really truly have a life-changing event that it will touch the lives of many, many people that were involved in this particular incident last night.
And the post-traumatic stress disorder, like you're mentioning, that is something that could linger for years and years, correct? In that it's not like turning off a light switch and that's the end of it. There's going to be flashbacks, I'm sure, for many that have gone through this.
Absolutely, and sadly, it is very much a disease, an issue that goes underreported and underdiagnosed, and many times police officers that need that type of help either don't seek it out of pride or don't seek it out of ignorance. And what ends up happening is you have folks that will live and relive that moment that occurred last night for the rest of their lives. I mean, people will begin to have fear of being close to tall buildings. They're going to have fear to go cover the next protest and serve as a law enforcement entity at the next protest. I guarantee you that there are conversations going on right now between family members and police officers about how the family member is discouraging the officer from continuing on his or her career in the profession. So, this really touches the nerve of many families and many people that lived through this, whether law enforcement or not, last night, will have those scars for the rest of their lives.
All right, Professor, I got to break one more time for traffic and weather, so I've got a couple more questions for you, so hold on. Drivers, I've got Dr. Alex Del Carmen. He is the Executive Director and Professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas, and we are going back over some of the details of this major story that happened in Dallas last night. Gunmen shot and killed 5 police officers, wounded 7 others during a protest over fatal police shootings of black men in other states, and it appeared to be the deadliest day for U.S. law enforcement since the 2001 terrorist attacks and Thursday's bloodshed, which unfolded just a few blocks from where President John F. Kennedy was slain in 1963. It also evoked the trauma of the nation's tumultuous civil rights era. I know a lot of you guys have followed this on social media. You watch a lot of the developments on television. This has made national and international news, and we're talking about where we go from here. What are some of the next steps in the healing process going forward? First, let's get an update on traffic and weather right now here on Sirius XM.
Now, traffic and weather on Road Dog Trucking News with Mark Willis.
All right, guys, I'm going to look at Paducah, Kentucky. I'm looking at some rain, showers, thunderstorm activity that is going to be developing later on this afternoon and evening. Strong gusty winds up to 40 miles an hour and torrential rain. likely with the strongest storms. Frequent lightning is also going to be problematic as we travel throughout the day today. If you are going to be around Great Falls, Montana, storms also expected in southwest Montana through the eastern sections of central Montana from Dillon down to Lewiston. In addition, a few stronger thunderstorms cannot be ruled out later on this afternoon from Helena to Lewiston. All right, guys, jump in. Would love to get you on board. Comments, observations. How do you feel about what happened last night? When you look at this from your vantage point out there, do you think that the country's heading into a darker time period? What do you think needs to be done to maybe facilitate the healing, to bring folks together and start the process of getting back on track? Again, it's 888-876-2336. Back in a minute. I'm Mark Willis, live across North America, right here on Sirius XM 146.
UFC 200 invades Vegas this weekend, and Sirius XM Rush 93 brings you so close to the action, you might just have to tap out. Today at 4 p.m. Eastern, the Luke Thomas Show is live from the UFC Fan Expo. Then, after the women's strawweight bout, we'll be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena for Sirius XM Post-Fight Live. It's UFC 200 on your home for Covino and Rich in the morning and combat sports all day. Sirius XM Rush, Channel 93.
If you're a trucker, you've been hearing about deadlines to comply with California's air quality regulations for some time now. Well, now is the time to comply. If you have questions, we can help. There is no better source for facts about California's truck regulations than arbtruckstop.com. It's your one stop for trusted information and compliance assistance. You can also call us at 866-6-DIESEL. Spend more time driving and less time worrying. Get the information you need at arbtruckstop.com.
When it comes to choosing a trucking company, choose one that invests in its drivers and their quality of life. Trans Am Trucking equips its Kenworth trucks with refrigerators, APUs, power to run your devices, automatic transmissions, voice navigation, and more. And now we are pleased to announce that Trans Am will be providing DirecTV in our trucks at no additional charge to our drivers. Call Trans Am Trucking at 800-370-9609 or visit transamtruck.com. To make your life on the road more livable, choose Trans Am Trucking.
People who can afford a LASIK procedure sure are lucky. Imagine being able to throw away your contacts and glasses. Imagine waking up tomorrow with 20/20 vision. Too bad everyone can't afford LASIK. Well, guess what? There's a company that agrees with you. TLC Laser Eye Centers is now offering great prices on high-quality LASIK to make it affordable for everyone. That means you get the latest FDA-approved all-laser LASIK technology for less than what others charge. And if you call right now, we'll schedule a free appointment so you can discover if LASIK is right for you. Results may vary. Call 1-800-929-1468. Even better, if you're one of the first 100 callers, ask about an extra $400 off your all-laser LASIK procedure. That's $200 off per eye. We've already performed over 2 million procedures. Let us help you. Discover how you can get the quality LASIK experience you deserve for less than what others charge. For your free appointment, call 1-800-929-1468. 1-800-929-1468.
Having your own business is a big responsibility. I was concerned that I lacked the expertise to manage my cash in the most efficient way, maximizing cash flow and making money on my deposits. Then I talked to Prosperity Bank's cash management officers who set up a sweep and lockbox. Thank you, Prosperity. Prosperity is the big bank with your community's bank inside, where you find real bankers, not just a bank. ProsperityBankUSA.com. Member FDIC. Texas and Oklahoma residents only.
The Dave Nemo Show, 7 a.m. East.
A continuing service for the professional truck driver.
Exclusively on Road Dog Trucking Radio. Keeping you up to date and informed. It's Road Dog Trucking News with Mark Willis.
All right, drivers, again, thank you for being out there, and I want to send a sincere thank you out there, ladies and gentlemen, to my guest who is on the program, Dr. Alex Del Carmen, the Executive Director and Professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University, talking about the aftermath of the shootings in Dallas in which 5 police officers were killed, the investigation, investigations have been fast and furious. They are ongoing, several law enforcement agencies involved. And where do we start with the healing process? And Professor, again, thank you for joining me on the program. You know, we talked about some of the administrative procedures, the investigative procedures that are going to be looked at. I'm sure we're going to step back and look at the hiring processes, you know, what we can do to make it safer out there. But some of the important takeaways as we get ready to wrap it up is one of the most important things to remember, that people are basically good people, whether in law enforcement or in general. What would you say?
Well, that's right. And I think that, you know, just like I said earlier in your show, I mean, when you look at the number of police officers that are oftentimes blamed for excessive use of force or things of that nature, I think the public sometimes we ignore the fact that this is the toughest job in the world. The police officers have an incredibly tough job, and they have a hard time being able to sometimes understand the demands of the public. That's not to give a racist or a police officer that should have never been a cop a license to do what they do, but at the same time, we have to remember that most police officers are decent, honest, hardworking people, and we just simply need to make sure that we adhere to the laws and obey their commands when they're being issued. Having said that, there's also the public expectation that should always be in place, that the Constitution of the United States prevails over any police officer, over anything that they do. And if we see, hear, or are witness to any kind of police misconduct, our obligation constitutionally is to report that, so those bad apples are simply removed from the good officers that are in place.
And do you think that one of the end results of this will be maybe a further strengthening of checks and balances within police departments overall, to allow folks the opportunity to maybe report things that should be reported out there, and help separate some of the fact from fiction, in other words?
Absolutely, and I think what I hope it also does is that it creates a dialogue between the community and the law enforcement organizations to be able to make sure that there is an understanding that, in fact, we have to talk and we have to sit down at the table and have these serious discussions that will allow us to better understand, the nature of police work, but also what the expectations of the public are. And what I also hope it does is it allows us to really look at the hiring practices of police, so we don't compromise and we don't settle for individuals that should have never been cops.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. I'm just about out of time, and I really appreciate you talking with the drivers out there and giving them the perspective of what's happening and where we go from here. Thank you so much, sir, and safe travels as you're out and about today.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Outstanding. That, drivers. And again, that's Dr. Alex Del Carmen. He is the executive director and professor at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. Yeah, very interesting story, very tragic story coming out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area.